Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn something about heart failure. Hope you have seen the Adpuzzle video showing pathophysiology of heart failure. So this topic will complete in two separate parts. In today's lecture we'll discuss about pathophysiology of heart failure and some part of drugs, and rest of the part we'll cover in the next lecture. Okay. So what is heart failure? Heart failure is basically inability of the heart to pump sufficient amount of blood which can meet the metabolic demand of the body. So heart is not able to pump sufficient amount of the blood. Now reason behind this may be any. It may be due to either inability of the heart to pump the blood or inability of the heart to relax. So whatever may be the reason, the ultimate thing is that heart is not able to pump sufficient amount of the blood, right? So now this heart failure is not a disease by itself. Means heart failure is basically a syndrome. It is a result of some disease. So either there are various causes like myocardial infarction or hyperthyroidism or anemia due to any disease which can lead to such condition in which heart is unable to pump sufficient amount of the blood, then it is known as heart failure, right? So it is basically a syndrome and not a disease, right? Now one more thing you have to understand, that now the term officially used is heart failure, not the congestive heart failure, right? Because heart failure can present in the form of congestion symptoms also and without congestive symptoms also, right? Where the difference is we'll see the later, but that's why it is not always referred as a congestive heart failure. In general it is known as heart failure. Congestion may be there and may not be there. Okay, so let's start about heart failure. First, pathophysiology of heart failure. To understand that, you must have this basic knowledge, and I hope you all know this, right? That in the both the ventricles, right and left ventricles, from where the blood comes and where it goes, right? So you all know deoxygenated blood uh, comes to right ventricle, and from there it goes to lungs, and oxygenated blood comes to left ventricle, and from here it goes to uh, body, right? So depending upon the part involved of the heart, the related symptoms or signs will take place in the patient, right? So this is how normal circulation in the heart is, that you all know. Now if you want to consider the heart failure as such, you can generally divide it into either left sided heart failure or right sided heart failure. As such, you cannot it is most of the time they are present as a combined entities, right? But sometimes they can be as a separate entity also, they can present as a separate entity also. Okay, so a is in this figure, a is showing right sided heart failure while B is showing left sided heart failure, right? So whenever there is right sided heart failure, or can say when the right side ventricle is not able to pump sufficient amount of the blood, it will lead to increase amount of the blood within the right ventricles, and that increase amount of the blood will generate a back pressure, and that back pressure, as the blood here from coming is coming from the uh, peripheral part, there will be peripheral congestion, or you can say it will result into peripheral edema in the body and venous distension will occur, right? Now coming to part B, where it is a left ventricle. Here in the left sided heart failure, as the left side receives blood, oxygenated blood from the lung, right? So whenever there will be right left sided heart failure, it will result in increased back pressure to the lung, right? So the patient left sided heart failure will be characterized by pulmonary congestion and obviously due to pulmonary congestion there will be shortness of the breath and edema will be there. So these are right sided heart failure which is leading to peripheral edema, means leg edema and all that, and with congestion, venous jugular veins are here, so it will lead to jugular venous congestion, and here there will be pulmonary congestion with shortness of breath. C is showing just pulmonary congestion. So it is left sided versus right sided heart failure. Now this left sided heart failure, you can also divide it into two entities, that is systolic versus diastolic heart failure. Now what is systolic heart failure and what is diastolic heart failure? Systolic heart failure means that heart is unable to pump sufficient amount due to insufficient contraction of heart, right? Due to insufficient contraction of heart is unable to pump, so that is systolic heart failure. And what is diastolic heart failure? Diastolic heart failure is that heart is unable to relax normally, which will allow enough blood to fill inside, right? So that is diastolic heart failure. So due to inability of the heart to dilate, enough blood is not filling into the ventricle, and that's why cardiac output is low. In case of systolic heart failure, due to inability of the heart to contract properly, cardiac output is low. So that is systolic heart failure and diastolic heart failure, right? In systolic heart failure, ejection fraction will be low. Why? Because contraction is not proper. So ejection fraction means it is a fraction of the amount of the blood that is left ventricle is ejecting, that is known as ejection fraction. So it will be always low in case of systolic heart failure, while in case of diastolic heart failure, ejection fraction can be normal. Why? Because the heart is contracting normally, that's why it is possible that heart may eject normal fraction of the blood can be ejected from the left ventricle. So that is the difference. In case of diastolic heart failure, ejection fraction can be normal, while in case of systolic failure, ejection fraction will always be low. So these are the types, you can say, you can divide it: right sided, left sided. Left sided heart failure can further divide into systolic and diastolic heart failure. One more types you can divide in the heart failure is low output versus high output failure. Low output is when the output is low, cardiac output is low. That is the normal type of, or you can say most common type of heart failure that can occur, and that leads to various congestive symptoms. But one more entity is there in which the output is high and still there is cardiac failure, right? So here this type of heart failure will occur in case of some coexisting conditions like hyperthyroidism or AV shunt, where the output is either normal or more, but still the body is developing symptoms, because in such conditions the metabolic demand of body is high, right? In case of low output failure, metabolic demand is normal but heart itself is not able to pump sufficient blood, while in case of high output failure, the heart is normal but as metabolic demand of body is increased, as in the case of hyperthyroidism, heart has to pump more, it has to work more, and that leads to heart failure. So these are the two types, low output and high output. And high output is the type when there are no congestive symptoms, right? There will be absence of congestive symptoms. That's why the term congestive heart failure has been removed, and now it is known as only heart failure. Congestion may be present or absent, right? So these are the two types. Okay, now once you have understood that what happens in right sided failure, what happens in left sided heart failure, let's come to the important thing, that how this heart failure develops, right? From the moment when the mechanism or the process of heart failure starts, it runs through a series of mechanisms which ultimately leads to the entity called as heart failure. So you have to know this series of reactions, because once you understand this series of reaction, you will be able to understand the treatment. So we divide into two parts: compensated heart failure and decompensated heart failure. So what is compensated heart failure? That once the cardiac output is reduced, heart will start a series of mechanism, as a result of which it will be able to meet the demand, means it will be able to release more blood from the heart, and the cardiac output will be normalized. So that is known as compensated heart failure, means heart has compensated the effect, but it will not run long time, because ultimately this compensated heart failure will result in decompensated heart failure. Well, in spite of all this mechanism, heart will not be able to meet the demand. So compensated heart failure, what is it? This figure will explain you what is the compensatory mechanism, right? In the video I asked one question, that is, what is the definition of cardiac output? So answer was, it is stroke volume into heart rate. So volume into heart rate, that is equal to cardiac output. So what heart wants, once there is a failure or decrease in cardiac output, heart will try to either increase the stroke volume or increase the rate, and that is how ultimately it will increase the cardiac output. So if you understand this figure, it will, because the mechanism of action of all the drugs used, they are involved in this figure itself. So this is heart failure. Here you can say decreased force of contraction and decreased cardiac output. Now as a result of this, due to decreased cardiac output, there will be body sensor mechanism. Due to decreased output, blood pressure will get lower and baroreceptor will get stimulated, and due to that there will be increased sympathetic discharge, right? Due to decrease in blood pressure, there will be activation in the beta receptor, and as well as there will be vasoconstriction. So increased sympathetic discharge will lead to vasoconstriction as well as beta 1 receptor activation. This beta 1 receptor activation will lead to increased force of contraction and increased heart rate, right? And due to vasoconstriction, there will be increase in preload and increase in afterload. Preload means the load which is occurring due to venous return, right? And afterload, that is a load that is occurring due to arterial constriction. So whenever there will be increased venous return to the heart, there will be increase in preload, and whenever there is increased peripheral vasoconstriction, it will lead to increase in afterload, right? So this will lead to increase preload as well as increase afterload. Now this thing, increase force of contraction and heart rate, increase preload and increase afterload, this all mechanism will initially lead to increased cardiac output. That was what I was talking about, that is compensated heart failure. Means the patient is having normal cardiac output, but heart is starting something to develop within itself. So that will be increased cardiac output via compensation. Okay, now what will happen, that this phenomena keeps on going and going until to the point where there is this you can say ultimately this phenomena will fail and there will be decrease in cardiac output. Now with the decrease in cardiac output, there will be decrease in renal perfusion, because due to lower blood flow, the renal perfusion will get lower. That leads to decreased GFR, and that will lead to increased sodium and water retention. And due to decreased renal perfusion, there will be increased renin release, You have learned this in renin-angiotensin system, right? That increase in renin ultimately leads to increase in angiotensin 2 receptors to angiotensin 2, and ultimately leads to increase aldosterone. So in short, it will lead to activation of renin angiotensin system, right? And what will happen, the next thing, that is cardiac remodeling. Now this term is very important to understand, because it will come across the whole chapter, and it must have come across to you during renin angiotensin system also. Now what is cardiac remodeling? It is nothing but, you all are aware, when a person uh, does regular exercise in the gym for the skeletal muscle, what will happen? There will be hypertrophy of skeletal muscle due to regular workout. Same thing happens to the heart also, heart muscle also. Due to all this increased activity, heart is working so much hard, so it will lead to hypertrophy of the cardiac muscle, right? So that is known as cardiac remodeling. Cardiac muscle get hypertrophied. That hypertrophy of the cardiac muscle will ultimately, see, initially that hypertrophy of muscle will help heart to pump more blood, but ultimately what happened, that due to that hypertrophy of the muscle, ischemia will develop, because within the muscle the blood vessels will get started getting constricted. So that will lead to ischemia, and ultimately it will lead to apoptosis within the heart muscles, and it will lead to ventricular dilatation. So you can say here it is a vicious cycle that will start, that this sympathetic activity will lead to cardiac remodeling, this will lead to cardiac remodeling, and ultimately that is leading to the ventricular dilatation, which again decrease force of contraction and cardiac output. So here a vicious cycle has started, that decreased cardiac output lead to increase all this mechanism. Once at a time it will compensate, but itself it will lead to cardiac remodeling, which will ultimately lead to decrease in cardiac. So it's vicious cycle will start on, and patient will start developing symptoms of cardiac failure. What are that symptoms? That are the back pressure, and that depends upon the site involved, right? Once from the left side, it will pulmonary congestion develop, so patient will develop symptoms of dyspnea, cyanosis, cough and all that. And from the right side, it will develop peripheral congestion, generalized edema, tachycardia, agonic, and once it involves portal circulation, it will lead to hepatic congestion and enlarged liver, nausea, vomiting. Hepatic congestion will develop at last, but pulmonary congestion and peripheral congestion will develop initially. One more question that I asked during AdPuzzle video was that, does right-sided heart failure eventually leads to left failure or not? The answer is yes, right? Vice versa can happen. Right-sided heart failure can lead to left also, and left can eventually leads to right side, because it's a game of pressure, right? So from one side it can transmit pressure to other side also. So this is all the compensated mechanism that heart develops, and ultimately this mechanism of compensation fails, and it leads to decompensated heart failure. Means that this mechanism has failed, and now in spite of this mechanism, heart is not able to pump enough amount of the blood, and that is known as decompensated heart failure, right? So compensated heart failure and that decompensated heart failure, and that leads to various symptoms that are occurring in the heart failure, right? Okay, and so due to this compensation, the heart size, ventricular dilatation, right, that will occur, and that is a peculiarity of the heart failure seen in chest X-ray. Here you can see the dilated heart. Normal it is like this. Here you can see the dilated heart with, this is the due to congestion, dilatations of all the veins has occurred. So this is the peculiar picture of heart failure in chest X-ray. So that is all about the pathophysiology. Now once we have understood this, it will be easy for you to understand the drugs. Drugs used in cardiac failure we divide into two groups, that is drugs with positive inotropic effect and drugs without positive inotropic effect. Now this word, I hope you all are aware, inotropic. Inotropic means which is related to the force of contractions. Means drugs which increase the force of contraction, they are in this group, and drugs which are helpful but does not increase the force of contraction of heart, they are known as they are included in the group without positive inotropic effect, right? Inotropic and chronotropic, these are terms. Chronotropics means related to heart rate, right? Okay, so this is the classification. Drugs with positive inotropic effect, cardiac glycoside, phosphodiesterase inhibitors, beta agonists, these are the groups. Today we'll learn about some part of cardioglycosides only. Rest of the drugs will cover in the next lecture. So first start with the cardiac glycosides group. Now this group involves this digoxin, digitoxins and ouabin, these three drugs. Digoxin and digitoxin are most commonly used drug. Okay, and this digoxin is derived from a plant, foxglove, right? So it is a plant derived medicine. To understand the mechanism of cardiac glycoside, it is inotropic drug. So its ultimate mechanism is it increases force of contraction of heart, and that's how it increases the cardiac output. Now this is the figure from KDT itself, very nicely explained mechanism of action of cardiac glycosides. Okay, it blocks this sodium potassium ATPase pump. Okay, but at this point forget this part and concentrate here. First we'll learn how the normal mechanism takes place in the cardiac muscle, right? So all the game is about this cytosolic calcium amount. This generates, because this cytosolic calcium amount will directly acts on this troponin C and it causes contraction of the heart muscle, right? So what will happen, through this calcium channel, calcium enters into the cell and into the cytosol. This is the cytosolic calcium, right? And this cytosolic calcium cause contraction of this muscle. Now this cytosolic amount, as it increases, this free calcium, it acts, this is the sarcoplasmic reticulum, through this ryanodine R2 receptor, RYR2 receptor, it acts on this receptor, and by acting on this receptor it will stimulate the release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So free calcium plus free calcium will stimulate trigger of calcium release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and this both will act on the muscle and stimulate it, right? Now after the contraction, the excess amount of the calcium will again be enter back into this sarcoplasmic reticulum by this SERCA2 channel. It is known as sarcoplasmic endoplasmic reticulum calcium ATPase. By this pump, it will enter back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So this is how normally the circulation of calcium occurs, and this SERCA2, it is maintained by protein that is known as phospholamban, and this phospholamban regulate the balance of this SERCA2. But the basic function of SERCA2 is to remove calcium from the cytosol into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, now the excess amount of the calcium within the cytosol after this cycle, means within the relaxation period, after calcium enters into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, the excess amount of the calcium will move out from the cytosol with the exchange of sodium, right? So sodium calcium pump is there which remove calcium with exchange of sodium. Now this intracellular sodium amount, it's maintained by this pump, that is sodium potassium ATPase, which works with the help of energy and in the exchange of potassium. So with the exchange of potassium, sodium will move out. So this is how normally the cycle goes on within the heart muscle cell, right? Now what digoxin will do, it will block this sodium potassium ATPase pump. Now once there is a blockage of this pump, what will happen, the potassium, the sodium will not move out, right? So there will be increased intracellular gradient of sodium, and this increased intracellular gradient will prevent extrusion of calcium, because as the more amount of sodium is inside, as it is not moving out, the intracellular gradient will increase, and that will not allow the more extrusion of calcium from the this intracellular level. So what will happen, ultimately there will increase intracellular pool of the calcium. So this excessive amount of calcium within the cytosolic level again will stimulate sarcoplasmic reticulum, and again both of them will cause more contraction of the cardiac muscle, and that will lead to increased force of contraction, which is compromised in heart failure case. Remember, in the normal case it will not increase this cardiac output. In case of heart failure, it will increase force of contraction, and that will ultimately compensate the loss of cardiac output, right? Now important thing is here is it depends on the potassium level, right? We'll discuss more during the adverse effects, but it affects the potassium level, so that is also important to remind. Second important thing is that it is causing force of contraction, and this increased calcium level can also leads to various type of arrhythmia, because calcium is the ultimate thing which is leading to contraction. So apart from causing increased force of contraction, it can also lead to various types of arrhythmias also, but that will see in the next part during adverse effects, right? So that is the mechanism of action of cardiac glycosides. Okay, now the rest of the part means the actions of cardiac glycosides and effects of other drugs, and what are the role of these drugs in cardiac heart failure, that we'll discuss in the next lecture. Today we have discussed the normal pathophysiology, normal plus pathophysiology of heart failure, as well as the introduction and mechanism of action of cardioglycoside. Rest of the thing we'll discuss in the next topic, next lecture. Thank you.